We are live. We are live. I'm so excited. I'm so excited because I am here with my neighbor, Judge Renee Henry. And so I'm Shanelle Dupree. I am a strategic connector with deep Midwestern roots that started in Oklahoma, Nebraska rather, traveled to Oklahoma and are now firmly rooted in Kansas. I'm a lawyer, a Bible study teacher, a social service administrator, an author, and a speaker. And today I am asking for Renee to introduce herself, and then we're going to talk about why we're here.
My name is Renee Henry. I'm a district court judge here in Wyandotte County, and I also happen to be one of Shanelle's neighbors.
So Renee and I see each other out, of course, in the community and see each other out in the neighborhood. And we have a shared love of reading. And we found that out because we were at a Sunflower House gala. And it was in 2019. We were, had the best intentions. And we decided we were going to start a book club for our neighborhood. And then life happened and then COVID happened. Right? And we didn't. So Renee, what did we do? What did we start in March?
So Shanelle actually had a great idea to do these live streams and kind of in lieu of a book club. And we had in March, my cousin is a professor of history and specializes in women's history and has a podcast about women's history. And so for Women's History Month, we did a similar live stream as we're doing today and had a really good discussion. And so we are continuing that. And we have our discussion today that I'm very excited about.
Yes. And
excited to learn.
Yes, absolutely. We're all learning, lifelong learners. And we have someone with us today. And I'm going to actually bring her on to the stream. And this is Chrisy Khatib. Hi, Chrisy.
Hello.
Hello.
This is actually a colleague of mine. So we are both regional directors for the Department for Children and Families. And Chrisy is the Northeast regional director. However, when I first came to the agency, number one, I heard about you before I met you. So I don't know if you realize that. Yeah. So folks were like, you need to meet Chrisy because she's like amazing. And I was like, who is Chrisy? I need to meet her. And so I met her and immediately it was like, she's so genuine. Like this is the most genuine person that you'll meet. And
she lived up to the hype.
She
lived up to the hype.
Lived up to the hype. And so prior to her being appointed as the regional director, Chrisy was actually the deputy director for adult protective services. And when I tell you that Chrisy has a passion for elders in the state of Kansas and just the vulnerable adults, she has a real passion and expertise in this area and spent so much time making recommendations for legislative changes and what would work better, right, for our adults in Kansas. And so Chrisy has done that. She was employed as a program consultant for KDAD, so Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services, and also took a special interest and expertise in substance abuse as well, and is doing a lot of things within the agency to bring attention to substance abuse. And so when we saw that June is Elder Abuse Prevention Month, we thought that Chrisy would be an excellent person to bring on and have this discussion. Welcome, Chrisy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shanelle. Thank you, Judge Henry, for this opportunity. I am thrilled to be here. Shanelle, I just need to walk around with you in my pocket because you make me feel so wonderful. So thank you. But June is World Elder Awareness Month, Abuse Prevention Month, and I am just really glad to be here to talk to you about elder abuse. It's a topic that I think as we see older adults, we see that this population is growing at such a tremendous rate, something that we need to talk about. So thank you for this opportunity. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. So we talked about playing just a quick kind of 5-minute video to lay the foundation so that we're all speaking the same language. We know what we're talking about when we say elder abuse. We understand what's happening within the state of Kansas, and then we can go from there because we have some interesting questions. And I would love to hear, Chrissy, as you're watching the video, if you could think about maybe like some 2 or 3 different like stories that you've had or that you've seen, because you supervise like 80 adult protective services workers that have seen so much and have gone through a lot and really work with these families, work with this population of adults. And so if you could be thinking about that, that would be amazing. But I'm going to go ahead and play the video. Is there anything else that we need to discuss before I do that?
I don't think so.
Treatment of a dependent adult and of elder adults in general. In July of 2018, several major changes took effect in state law regarding mistreatment of a dependent adult and of elder adults in general. These changes empower law enforcement, first responders, and prosecutors to better assist those who are at risk for exploitation, neglect, and abuse.
The first important change is that elder is now defined as any individual who is 60 years of age or older. Prior to the change, an individual had to be 70 years of age in order to be classified as an elder for criminal purposes. The second important change is that guardianship and conservatorship were added to the list of legal relationships under Section A2. If someone obtains personal property or financial resources for the benefit of the defendant, while violating the Guardianship or Conservator Act, they may be charged with mistreatment of a dependent or elder adult. It should be noted that powers of attorney and trust are already covered by this same section in the statute. The final important change is that pursuant to KSA 21-5402, any felony committed under the mistreatment of an elder or dependent adult statute is an inherently dangerous felony.
These types of cases used to be misdemeanors. You could steal $1 million from a vulnerable adult and it would be a misdemeanor. And we have moved away from that, thankfully. And now the penalties are much higher. And then we also have felonies for physical abuse as well as neglect.
The existing state statute, along with these changes, have become an important tool in fighting crimes against our dependent adults and the elder population.
There are 3 categories of crimes covered by this statute. They are physical abuse, such as infliction of physical injury or unreasonable confinement; financial abuse, which includes taking property of another, using such things as coercion, deception, or simply taking the property without adequate consideration, which is defined as customary payment for such goods or services. Financial crimes also include fiduciary abuse, such as power of attorney, trustee, or a conservator taking property or financial resources for the benefit of themselves rather than using them for the principal. The final category is neglect, which means someone who is charged with caring for another individual and fails to provide treatment, goods, or services necessary to maintain the physical or mental health of such dependent.
A good example that we had was a son who was in charge of his mother's trust. And he would withdraw funds via an ATM from her trust account, and he would use that money to buy drugs. Mm-hmm. Clearly, the mother is receiving no benefit from that. She had cognitive disabilities, so she wasn't even aware of what was going on. But absolutely, we can prosecute those cases. The same with neglect cases. If they are not taking them to the doctor, if they're not feeding them, if they're not cleaning them, there's been a misconception for many years that if you have a durable power of attorney, you can do whatever you want. If you are in charge of the trust, you can do whatever you want. If your name's on the checking account, you can do whatever you want. And that's absolutely not true. What you'll hear in court is a durable power of attorney is not a license to steal.
What can law enforcement and first responders do to assist in the support of the victims as well as the prosecution of the perpetrators?
We would be required to verify that they are physically safe to be in that home. And if you determine that they are unsafe in that home, the next phone call would be to EMS to have an evaluation on both the mental and the physical aspect of that particular elderly person. We, law enforcement, count on the perspective, the opinion of EMS to advise if that person is capable of staying at home alone.
Yeah, so there's always obviously the physical, just unexplained bruises, things along those parts there from that physical side of it there. The harder ones to see are obviously, is there a family member maybe taking advantage? We'll see this on some of the calls that we'll hear of either maybe the males piling up at the door, just some of those things, just anything that just doesn't fit right. It really almost follows the motto of see something, say something.
And then law enforcement has always questioned what's our next step. But this is their opportunity in a home to notice what are the contents of the home. Look in the refrigerators, look in the cupboards of the kitchen, go to the restrooms. Are they clean? Does it have a shower bar? Does it have the appropriate uses for somebody that is aging in their home?
It could be how the caretaker is taking care of the vulnerable victim. It could be how the residence is set up. Is it dirty? Where are the medications? They have these immediate observations as well as patrol. As time passes and we get involved, things can change at that residence. So to get the full picture of what is going on, we need these first responders to document what they see, to make notes of statements made by caretakers. They're an essential component to the case.
I do feel that the communities and society are paying attention and recognizing there are individuals out there and groups that can assist our elderly in their homes and in situations where they are being exploited and abused.
One of the big things we always try to tell our guys, saying just because you report doesn't mean somebody's going to get pulled out of their home. This just opens up that investigation and at least triggers that safety net and try to make certain that if something bad is going on, that is caught and before it becomes worse.
I was unaware of APS and all of the resources that they have. So they bring to the table a number of interpretations that law enforcement does not have. Adult Protective Services has become one of our best partners in the elderly community.
Love that video. I feel like it does a really great job of just kind of synthesizing what this is: elder abuse, adult protective services, and all of that. And so just wanted to mention that Naomi is loving this conversation. So thanks, Naomi. And Aratina is loving it as well. So thank you all for that. I love hearts. They make me feel good. So Chrisy, were you involved in that video at all or making that video?
I absolutely was. So that's right when the statutes had changed or were in the process of changing. And I'm always ask. The worst thing you can hear is no. So I reached out to DCF administration and asked if we could put this video together. And they said, absolutely. We found the right people to come together. And it was just a great opportunity and a way to highlight World Elder Abuse Awareness in June. And we actually did a presentation in Topeka, and it was right when Secretary Laura Howard became the Secretary of DCF, and she presented. So it was a great day.
That's awesome. I didn't know that you were the mastermind behind the video.
I don't know about mastermind, but I sure I enjoyed being a part of it. Absolutely.
I love it. I love that you were the mastermind of the video. Okay.
It wouldn't have happened without you, Chrisy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so pop quiz. Elder abuse. Elder abuse is defined as someone over the age of, is it 60, 70, or 80? What is elder abuse specifically? Or was it the statute change? Yeah, so the statute changed to change the definition of elder abuse for someone over the age of, was it 60, 70, or 80? Judge, what was it?
60.
What did you say?
60, wasn't it?
60. Chrisy, is that correct?
it was 70 and it moved it back to 60. And there's a little bit of pushback about that. And I think I kind of get it because I turned 53 this year. So people were like, I don't know if is 60 really an elder? And what I like to share with people, if you're 60 years of age or older, there are some additional protections for you. And how wonderful is that the state of Kansas values you so much that we're going to look out for you. And if somebody hurts you, it's going to be a felony. So
wow, because the ADA in the video said that you could steal $1 million from someone, someone who was considered an elder, and they could be charged with a misdemeanor.
yes.
Like, what was happening with their laws to where that was happening?
You know, Kansas, it's my understanding that, and I wasn't a part of this this change in the laws, but it's my understanding that Kansas was just, again, being very proactive, looking at different laws across the United States. An example would be physical abuse. If you were to punch a 90-year-old in the face, give him a black eye, everybody on this call would understand that would have a devastating effect on an elder. Where if you punch somebody, first of all, we shouldn't be punching people, but if we punch an 18-year-old, that's a very different. So before, that would have been just a misdemeanor too. So this really tightened up or strengthened the laws around elders. And it's not just elders, it's dependent adults, so people with disabilities, just looking out for that population.
So thank you for mentioning that. So sometimes we forget about vulnerable adults, is what I call them. So it could be someone who's literally 18 years old, but has some different impairments, and they're susceptible to being taken advantage of. And so there does have to be extra protections for them as well. So, but that's the definition of elder abuse. What about adult protective services? So what does an adult protective services person do on a typical day? So what would that look like?
Yeah, I would love to tell you about that. So Adult Protective Services is within the Department of Children and Family Services under the Prevention and Protective Services umbrella. So Adult Protective Services, those often tend to be licensed social workers or people in those sorts of profession. What happens is a concern comes into the Protection Reporting Center, and that's assigned to a protection specialist, an APS specialist. That worker would go out to the home and try to make face-to-face contact with the involved adult. What I often hear is, now, Chrissy, do you guys call ahead of time? And I will tell you, no, those are unannounced visits. So we will go out and make 2 attempts to make contact with that adult. What we do is once we make contact with them, we review the concerns on what's being reported to us, and cases can be assigned for, and correct me, Shanelle, I don't want to go on and on because I just get excited about this topic. But cases can be assigned for abuse, that's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and that does happen in the elderly and with vulnerable adults. They can be assigned for neglect, and they can also the financial crimes, which is starting July 1st, that changes, but that could be right now fiduciary abuse or financial exploitation. And then also self-neglect, and that's when we know maybe concerns about a vulnerable adult not taking care of themselves. So we would go out, we would complete those investigations. We have a time frame in which we have to make a case finding. DCF for Adult Protective Services requires clear and convincing evidence to substantiate a perpetrator. And that name, if we do substantiate, that name would be placed on the central registry. What's so important about that registry is often many professionals helping professionals, whether it be home health, hospice, hospitals, they check that registry and before they hire people because they want to make sure that their names aren't on the registry. But at the end of the day, Shanelle, it's all about helping people. It's how do we get the services that adults need so they can live a quality life and live in the least restrictive environment.
Chrissy, that kind of segues into my next question. Why should we care?
Oh gosh. So Henry, that caught me off guard. I'm like, why should we care? Of course we should care. Why we should care? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think about the adults in my life that have had, I don't know about you, but those grandparents in my life have been such a huge influence. I wouldn't be here today without two amazing grandmothers that led me along the way. But why we should care is that these are adults that have just, again, been influential in our lives. We have a responsibility to them. This is a population that sometimes can't look out for themselves, can't protect themselves, and they really need us to lend a helping hand. When I think about what kind of triggers this, I always think about the dependency factor. I think about the more dependent somebody is on another person to have their needs met, the likelihood of abuse or neglect or exploitation goes up. So I want to repeat that. As dependency goes up, so does abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So if we know somebody is very dependent on others, it's a good idea for us to look out for them.
I never really
I actually have another question. Talking about like kind of what I have seen is the criminal side of it. And I know that with the fiduciary duty, like those are really hard to prove. If it's somebody who's on the account and, there's always the argument, well, that money was for things for the dependent. So do you guys just spend a lot of time poring over financial documents? And
I really
how
appreciate
difficult from your end is that?
I so appreciate this question. And again, Judge Henry, you might want to tell me to calm down because I get excited. When it comes to financial crimes, I will tell you that sometimes those are a little bit easier. And you're going to be like, what, Chrissy? But they're more black and white. Statute does allow for DCF to request bank records. So we don't have to have a subpoena. We can request those records DCF has the authority to request those. So if we get a concern that an elderly person or a dependent adult, there's financial concerns, we would request bank records. Now, we request anywhere between 6 to 12 months worth of bank records. And I'm going to tell everybody right now, I can't even balance my checking account. So thank goodness for my husband. But DCF has a financial accountant that works with us, and that we have a really nifty program called Bank Scan. It allows us to look at those bank records, run through a computer system, and it puts those in spreadsheets. Now you're asking, so, okay, Chrissy, you get it in a spreadsheet, what happens next? Well, if we see an older adult is for the last 3 years has been able to pay their bills and no problems, and all of a sudden we have checks bouncing, we have them utilities not getting paid, we'll start going through those bank records and we'll notice different spending patterns. And I got to tell you, I used to see it all the time. You'd see maybe an adult son or daughter who's moved back into the home, and they might be helping themselves to mom or dad's checking account. And all of a sudden you will see expenses to liquor stores, to the casino, I saw lots of Amazon Prime. I saw lots of video game. And let me tell you, I can tell you grandma is not playing video games. So what would happen is we'd get those records. We'd sit down with our involved adult. We'd go through those bank statements and say, did you spend money on this? Did you spend money on that? Oftentimes they would say no. It's a very conflictual, especially when you love your perpetrator. And we can talk about that later, but that's really hard. And so go through those statements, and then we have basically concrete evidence to show that they didn't spend that money, and here's a record of what was spent. So I hope that answers that.
Yes, thank you.
So just to kind of piggyback off that, I am going to ask you a question, Chrissy, because of something that my husband actually put out. He said, great information, great resources, an amazing interview. Next video must have WICO ADA. We will not be outdone by JOCO. All our elderly must be protected, be blessed. So my question is, what would you consider to be a perfect working relationship between a district attorney or a county attorney's office and our office, DCF? So when we get the call that there are concerns, what would be like the best case scenario that you see happen?
So what's the best case scenario? Well, I think anytime you just have a positive, healthy working relationship with your county attorney or district attorney where you can provide information of cases that have been substantiated, I mean, anytime that's a success. What in Kansas, we do have they're called FAST teams, financial abuse specialist teams. And for example, in Johnson County and in Sedgwick County, they meet monthly and they present. It started off as just financial crimes, but they bring financial crimes and also serious abuse, neglect, exploitation crimes. And so what happens is the county attorney is there or the district attorney is there. We have law enforcement there and we have adult protective services there. And all of those cases are staffed, we're talked about, and how do we tackle those cases holistically? And how do we work together? Because we all know that as resources become limited, it is absolutely imperative that we work together and we communicate effectively. So I would tell you, Shanelle, just that collaborative relationship. And anytime you can participate in a multidisciplinary team or a FAST team, we tend to see greater results. I have to tell you, I know conviction, I'm not saying that conviction is incredibly important, but at the end of the day, I'm a social worker. It's about keeping people safe. And that's always got to be our primary focus.
Absolutely. And when you're able to address what the issues are and maybe put some different safeguards in place, then that helps.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So you heard it, DA Dupree. Fast team. Okay, awesome. So, thank you, Renee, for asking that question. Why should we care? Because I really do think that sometimes we forget about our older adults, but they really are like our parents, our grandparents. And I remember I was already at the house, but my parents they live in Oklahoma, and we actually moved into a neighborhood that was like, most of our neighbors were probably about 20 or 30 years older than my parents. And so I've seen definitely a lot of things happen to some of the folks on my parents' block. And one thing in particular that I remember is the woman that used to live next to my parents. She was 80 years old and she was raped. I remember that, like she was raped at 80 years old, and it was like someone that was coming to do work on the house, and just a crazy situation. And it was shocking to think that could even happen to an 80-year-old, and so ultimately one of her children ended up moving into the house and helping her until she ended up passing at like 95 years old. So she was able to, of course, rebound. But you're right, Christy, it's like the more dependent you are, the more susceptible you are to abuses, which is terrible, but it's the truth. So thank you for that. So, Chrissy, if someone thinks that an adult that they love or know is being abused, what do they do?
So you heard me say a little bit before, because I think these cases and like any case, whether it be child or adult, they're quite complex. But what makes adults a little bit different, and I want to take if we have a little bit of time to talk about self-neglect, but we often see, or maybe the pop quiz should be, who tends to be our alleged perpetrators? I bet both of you probably already know this answer.
I would guess other family members, kids or.
Right.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
Yes, it's family members. And I will tell you, a lot of times it starts off with the best of intentions. You have an adult son or daughter who maybe is going through some hard times. Maybe COVID is going on. And so they make a decision to move back home with mom, who's getting older. Maybe she's a widow. And so move back home, best of intentions. But what we find as days progress, weeks, years, that elderly person's needs grow and they become greater and more. Sometimes they can be a bit more difficult. And if you've been around loved ones that have dementia, sometimes they can be very difficult to care for, right? And then we often see sometimes caregivers or adult children who back into the home. They may have some of their own issues. We often see history of like mental health issues, substance use disorder. So we end up getting some really bad combinations. It starts off well, but as need progresses, it gets more strenuous, and then poor decisions are made. I truly in my heart of heart believe people don't intentionally, I think I'm going to move back home and beat mom. It doesn't work that way. But people make poor decisions under the influence of alcohol and drugs, if they're off their medication, and if they're exhausted. That's anybody. So those are sometimes we see those situations. So what should you do? I think this is really difficult for our vulnerable adults to come forward and have those conversations. And so really it's about finding people that they trust. So if you come across somebody that you have concerns about, could you have a private conversation with them? Or do you know somebody that they do trust that might be willing to have a private conversation? I would tell you, you're always welcome to call DCF, Department for Children and Family Services, and call that 1-800 number. I do know Shanelle had it posted, and we will have a protection specialist out to the home to visit with that adult. If you see somebody that has immediate concerns, you always contact the law enforcement. And we'll do our absolute best to build rapport, try to make that person feel safe, and then have a facilitated conversation with them about the concerns. The other thing I would tell you is sometimes people don't disclose that first time or that second time. So you might have to call a third or a fourth time. Don't give up, because we'll keep going out and we'll keep trying. I can't tell you the number of times it was the fifth or the sixth intake in which somebody finally said, look, I'm exhausted. I can't do this anymore. Here's what's going on. And then we will do whatever we can to support that adult and try to keep them in the home. So
along those lines, who typically makes the report, especially something like financial abuse, where it's probably, I won't say it's probably, but it may be a child of the parent, and how does anyone else even figure that out? Or who reports typically?
So there are mandated reporters, just like on the child side. So it's going to be physicians, teachers, educators. But additionally, with Adult Protective Services, the banking institution are mandated reporters. And they call in often lots of the financial crimes, because what they'll see is, I used to tell a story of, I don't know about you guys, but you may know your banker, but my banker's name is Miss ATM, and she's gorgeous. I just run by, I see her, I give her a little card, I punch some numbers, she gives me what I need, hopefully, and then I'm out the door, right? Because I don't have time to pull into the bank. But if you think about our elderly, they're amazing, they're adorable, they melt my heart. They literally pull into the bank. They get out of their car, they walk through the door. I bet you half the time the bank teller could tell them what they had for Thanksgiving dinner. Right. But it's because they have those relationships. I can remember a case where the bank teller knew the elderly woman, adult son just moved back in the home. He was kind of towering over her when they were at the bank, and talked to a loan officer, and he was like, Mom, you're going to do this, and Mom, you're going to do that. And, the bank knew something was wrong, and they called in a concern. And we actually worked with law enforcement. We got the video, and there was some other stuff going on that was quite concerning. So the banks are great mandated reporters for our financial cases. Hospitals, we know a lot of our elderly and vulnerable adults often frequent the ER. So they're often a big reporter of that too, and primary physicians. Optometrists were just added additionally to the mandated reporter, and that will go effective July 1st.
That's something. Like, I remember when I first read that statute, I just didn't think that financial institutions would be mandated reporters, but they see it, right? They see it. And you're right. Like, I know I go to the bank, and I go to a different teller every time. I'm just trying to go, get in and out. And our elders, they know the names, and the bankers are calling them by name. How are you doing today, Mr. Jones? And yeah. So they know.
Adorable.
Absolutely. Well, so, Chrissy, you actually brought up a point where it's like where you have where you have kind of a recipe for disaster. You have someone who has heightened needs, who may, their personality may be changing, whatever the case may be. And then you have an adult who may have issues of their own, and they move back into the home with the best intentions of helping, but now, there's some hurting happening. So my question, we were actually talking about this offline, is self-care for caregivers. Like how is that being kind of talked about and pushed out for people who are taking care of vulnerable adults, whether they're 18 or whether they're 85?
That's a really good topic. And sometimes what we find, Shanelle, which is heartbreaking, is sometimes we find that the caregivers pass away before the vulnerable adult because the care is exhausting. So I think that's a really difficult situation. I can tell you that the Alzheimer's Association has some amazing support groups available. I know that's a conversation we often have when Adult Protective Service goes to the home and meets with the caregiver, tries to link them with some community resources. And sometimes you have to have those heart-to-heart conversations. I will tell you, I remember meeting with a family. The loved one had a very chronic issue. He was at risk of, I'm not going to say the word correctly, but choking, because his body was becoming so frail. And I will tell you, I want to get teary-eyed just saying this because I was sitting in the home and I was crying and I was thinking, well, that's a great social worker, boo-hooing. But, I had to have the conversation at some time. You have to make a difficult decision. Do you want to love this person? And you love them, but do you just want to be there to support them and love them and help them on their journey? Or do you want a caregiver? Because sometimes those roles are so hard to do both at the same time. And so this person was so medically fragile. The family made the decision with this person that, look, we think we want to get you a higher level of care. We're going to make this plan to come visit you. But when we see you, we just want to love you. We just want to be with you. And we just want to support you, because it's hard doing both right now. So it was an emotional conversation, and the family came to that conclusion.
Wow.
It was hard.
So Chrisy, was that, and maybe you said this and I missed it, was that some sort of report of abuse that you were there, or can people call in just to get resources and you were there helping give them resources?
So in that particular case, it did come in as a neglect, and our workers do this work all the time, and so sometimes people misinterpret things, and we would come out. We don't go out with the sole intention of, did you do X, Y, or Z? You could just tell in this case, as we started exploring it and having conversations, yes, it did come in as a lack of supervision, but it was because the caregiver was exhausted and the caregiver was struggling. And so that was a case we definitely unsubstantiated and helped that family make decisions to support everybody.
So if someone did want to get some resources, can they call your office, or where would they go when there wasn't necessarily something that arose to the level of abuse or neglect, but maybe just wanting to know what resources are out there?
Yes, absolutely. So anybody can call in a report to.
Did she freeze up?
She did.
Oh no.
Oops. I'm gonna remove her real quick. And then I'll add her back. Okay. She'll come back.
I hope she can go.
She does. Good conversation. Good conversation. I haven't really thought about the caregivers and how much support that they really do need. I mean, it's kind of like being a parent, but in the reverse. When you think about it.
Yes.
And you're probably a lot older and probably a lot tireder.
I know there's a lot of information about like the sandwich generation. So maybe you have kids you're raising and you're trying to be a caregiver to parents or grandparents. So I'm sure it is.
Like I can't
a lot.
imagine. I can't imagine. But I know people do it. I know people absolutely do it because they have to do it. And so Chrisy is back on with us.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
You are fine. So Renee was actually asking about resources. So what if someone needs, a family's like, look, we know where this is headed. We need to kind of prepare ourselves. What are some resources and some options that families can look at?
So I would always tell them if they believe a family is in need of resources, definitely contact the Protection Reporting Center and we could go out and visit with them about resources in the community. You can also contact the AAAs, the Area Agency on Aging. Just reach out to them and they're familiar with all of the resources in the community. They're an excellent source of help. And I can tell you they did get some additional funds through COVID. So I think there's some extra ways that they can help families right now. So that's a wonderful resource. There's also waivers. A waiver in the elderly population would be an elderly and disabled waiver. It allows people to get a special a Medicaid card that provides for additional services on top of regular Medicaid. And the AAAs are also, I know this gets a little confusing, but the AAAs are also the ADRCs. And so but basically, if you call a AAA and want to know if somebody would qualify for some additional services, they're going to go over all of that information with you. So yeah, that's where I would start.
Chrissy, is that the website?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the Kansas Aging and Disability Resource Center. And so it looks like there's like one in Johnson County I saw. I didn't see specifically one in Wyandotte. Like, are they different chapters or?
There is one in Wyandotte. The one in Wyandotte serves both Wyandotte County and Leavenworth County.
Okay.
But they are statewide. Again, you just reach out to them. They've got some services through their facility that they can offer, and they can connect you also. I mean, there's just some amazing programs out there.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so it says here that they provide unbiased information about supports and services for you to make an informed decision. They receive about 675 calls per week. So somebody knows about them. So k4ad.org. That is awesome. And then, of course, if people are caregivers and need counseling or all of that, they can definitely check with if they have health insurance, check with their local providers. And then you mentioned Alzheimer's Association has a really good program as well.
Yes.
Awesome. We're giving out resources here. So that is awesome. So, Chrissy, let me ask you this. So have you seen a situation though, where it's not someone else, it's the family is concerned about their aging parent or grandparent and like they need to take the keys away or, like they need to begin having those types of conversations. Have you ever been involved in situations like that?
Yes, lots of those situations. So it kind of leads us into, I'm so glad we're here because the topic around guardianships and capacity. So I can't begin to tell you the number of times I worked with family members who've said, you know what, I'm really worried about dad. Dad's still driving. Dad can't really see that well. I've been noticing all kinds of different marks on dad's car. I personally remember even when my husband had to have the conversation with his grandfather about driving. And so those are really difficult conversations because guess what? This won't surprise you. People are very concerned. They like their independence. They're afraid that DCF or anybody, their children, are going to put them in a nursing home, lock them up, and never be seen again. I got to tell you, I don't know if I want to go to a nursing facility. Those are things that scare myself. So what can you do? Well, you just start having those conversations. You're honest about your fears. But if you have significant concerns and you think somebody might lack capacity, and we can talk a little bit more about that, that's when we need to start having conversations with medical professionals. I can think of this most amazing daughter in Douglas County. Her dad was a veteran. He's served his country. His wife was a little concerned. She was a little fearful that she could take her husband's keys away because he would be pretty upset. So what happened is the daughter got involved. We talked about getting another appointment set up with the VA. The daughter went with the father to the medical appointment and started sharing some of those concerns. Was dad upset? Yes, but the physician was there to help with those discussions around safety. So that was very helpful. And then there are situations with this gentleman that his dementia had progressed enough that he lacked capacity. And so if you want to know more about that one, I did write down the statute. It's KSA 593064. But in the state of Kansas, I always tell people you always assume somebody has capacity. I can't tell you the number of phone calls I would get, like, you need to go pick this person up, or you need to go do that. And I would explain to them, well, that's called kidnapping, and I might get in a little bit of trouble. I might be meeting with judgment in a different avenue, and I don't want to do that. So what happens is, if you feel like somebody lacks capacity, then per statute that you would work with the medical professional and you would get a medical statement, and that statement would indicate that the individual lacks capacity and is in need of a guardian. And oftentimes we will work with families if to help the family pursue guardianship if necessary, or there are situations where there is no family available, and we might work with the Kansas Guardianship Program to find that individual guardian.
That is awesome. This is such a rich topic. I know that there's so many places that we could go with this. And we've literally been on for 45 minutes, although it doesn't feel like it. It does not feel like we've been on this long. So, Renee, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think that is there anything else that folks need to know about APS? So any kind of final questions that you have, Renee?
I just would ask Chrisy, is there anything else that you feel like, what's the most important thing people should take away from this tonight, and what else would they need to know?
I think the one thing that kind of sticks with me is that it kind of takes me back to why we should care question. The United States is changing, and I personally don't think we're having enough of those conversations. And what I mean by changing is by 2050, there will be more people aged 65 and older than 15 and under. That is the very first time the United States has ever experienced something like this. When you think of the U.S., I don't know, when I think of the U.S., I think of this little White House, and I think of a mom, or I think of a couple with young children, right? But that's not where it's going to look like in the next 30 years. We're going to see so many more older adults. And when you think of the 65 and older population, the fastest growing in that population is 75 and older. So people are living longer. That's wonderful. I'm thrilled that people are living longer. But again, I want to go back to that statement: as dependency goes up, abuse, neglect, and exploitation goes up. So those are some things we need to consider. I think we need to be looking out for our loved ones, be talking to them about what do they want in their future. I've had that conversation with my own parents, and they roll their eyes at me, and I said, well, what do you want? What do you want as you get older? Do you want to stay in your home as long as you can? Would you want to be in a nursing facility? I asked my mom, I said, do you want to be in the same room with Dad? And she said yes, but we're having those conversations because I know I'm going to be responsible for myself and my brother and my husband, our family. We're going to be supporting my parents as they get older. And so making sure that their needs are met and making sure that their wishes are met. And that requires courage to have those difficult conversations.
That's awesome. Courageous conversations are needed. They're needed. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chrisy. Thank you so much for sharing your time with Judge Henry and I. Judge, sound like you were about to say something.
Oh, I just was going to also thank Chrisy for agreeing to take her time tonight to educate us about a very important topic.
I feel like I learned more, and I'm thinking more deeply about this topic and how what this looks like moving forward. So thank you, Chrisy.
You're welcome. Thank you. First of all, thank you for being surrounded by amazing, strong women. I just appreciate you being interested in this topic. And I would tell you, your listeners, if you want to learn more, we'll get you connected to the right people.
Awesome. Parting words from Chrisy Khatib, who I consider and who is an expert in elder abuse and adult protective services. Take care, everyone.